Welcome, everybody. It's the Papers Podcast. We're doing something a little bit different today, not in a John way, but in a retrospective kind of way. We're calling this episode Wrapping Papers. We're going to have a look back at the last year, and we've each selected two papers, which we haven't done, even if we like them, either because maybe one of us is a co-author, and we always punish our co-authors, or it was just something that just didn't fit our format. So today we're going to go rapid fire, two papers each, and we got a little treat for you today in this episode. So the gang's all here. Welcome, Lara.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, John.
Hey, everybody. Happy end of 2024.
Welcome, Linda. Linda,
you're on mute.
My new
This year and different. Every other year.
resolution is to teach you all how to use the tech.
Differently, I should.
Darren and I are trying to be really good. Hi there, and I'm wearing my cowboy hat so I can lasso those papers and then wrap them up.
well, John will be rapping later. Hopefully it'll be in the paper kind of way, but we'll see. All right, so this is rapid fire format. We're going to dive right in. We're going to throw to one of us. John, you are up first, my friend. Take it away.
Well, I have a great paper. We have a rule on the Papers Podcast where we don't promote each other's papers, but this one is too good to miss. This is by Varpio, by herself. Apparently nobody wanted to write a paper with her. I'm just saying, there's a meta there. It's published in Perspectives on Medical Education 2024, and it's part of the Writers series. And I'll say, it must be daunting, Varpio, to write well when you're talking about writing well. There's a double layer of, don't drop the ball here.
Totally.
This paper is about creating effects in your writing, tools to use or not. Now, you'll all recognize that when we speak, and now I'm feeling a little bit conscious that I want to be more accentuated, or I might want to slow down, or I might want to have some type of intonation that says what I'm going to do next is important. Spoiler alert, maybe it's not. But where we have that in our oral communication, sometimes in our writing communication, we write in that monotonic, non-changing, very boring type of phrase. And by the end of the first paragraph, your reader's not brought in. This paper gives you a set of tools: italics, bold, dashes, parentheses, and scare quotes to add to your writing toolkit. I have a question. Where is ellipses? Ellipses are my jam. I love ellipse here or there.
The scare quotes is new to me. That was radical.
So when you're thinking about how can I level up my game, The Writer's Craft is a series I'd highly recommend to you, published in PME. This is a specific article that I think should be on your reading list if you missed it in 2024. And I think it really will bring not only an artistic quality, an engagement, the ability to leverage the narrative and the argument you're going to kind of make. But for when you think about non-technical or non-research writing, whether it's a brief for work, a blog on social media, it also allows people to work through what you're writing with different points of visual capture. Linda, what do you think of this paper?
So first of all, I love this paper. Thanks very much. And I love The Writer's Craft in general. I recommend all of that series very, very highly to you. The third love I have is one that John has too, and that is I love ellipses. However, I think what I got out of this is that writing is a conversation. It's the written part of theater. Punctuation replaces that oral, AU oral and OR oral, and visual part of acting and drama. And we have to remember that it's part of a conversation. So thank you very much, Lara, for that. That is a fantastic paper.
Linda, just before you go, I got to say, Lara got a Prime Journal paper by writing about italices. Like, I got to jump in on this and write about the entomology of capitals or something. I got to get a paper out of this.
But could I tell you the origin of that paper? So if you don't know what scare quotes are those little quotation marks you put around a word. But we tend to put them in at the wrong time. So a lot of people want to put those quotation marks around all the a whole bunch of words, like if they want to emphasize or whatever. It's only meant supposed to be ironic, like when Dr. Evil calls himself quote unquote evil, right? Like, but anyway, it was like I got to the point where I couldn't take another set of scare quotes in a paper without like something needed to be done. But thanks for picking it, John. Appreciate it.
Point of order: the square quotes go around Doctor in Dr. Evil.
Sure, he is evil. He's up there. He's a doctor.
You're right.
All right, Linda, back to you.
Okay. And by the way, scare quotes are the written equivalent of the drama of air quotes.
Ooh.
Anyway, so I'm going to move on with the next paper now. Why did I choose this paper? Not because there's anything huge, that it's a huge review or anything like that, but planetary health is a really important concept for health professionals. We know very little about it, about the actual content of planetary health. We know even less about teaching and learning about planetary health. And we know even less about teaching and learning planetary health in low and middle income countries. So here is a welcome paper from South Africa. It's called Education About Planetary Health and Sustainable Healthcare in Low and Middle Income Countries, Planetary Health Report Card Assessment of Perceptions at the University of Cape Town Faculty of Health Sciences by Erlam and colleague. Now, that is a long title that sort of tells you a little bit about the paper. What these authors do, they describe the use of this scorecard, the Planetary Health Report Card, and the goal of the paper was to assess the perceptions of their faculty about planetary health and sustainable healthcare using that scorecard, and perceptions of the barriers and opportunities for integrating it into the curricula at that med school. They used the scorecard and also interviewed faculty members. Interestingly, only one student who completed the scorecard, and their results were, I would say, pretty shocking but not surprising. On the scorecard, there were abysmally low grades on all aspects, whether it be curriculum, research, advocacy, etc. The interviews pointed out that it was an important and relevant area that was not well taught, and there were lots of the usual barriers to curriculum change. They did not mention students who may be more knowledgeable about planetary health and sustainability than their faculty members. And I was kind of surprised about that. So bottom line is, there is a need here for this emerging concept to be taught and assessed. The report card, which was described, can be used as an ongoing metric to look at progress if you're trying to change something. And this paper, for me, really raised the awareness about planetary health. Lara, do you want to say something about this one?
I sure do, Linda. So thanks so much for picking a paper about planetary health. This is a topic that is so very important and pressing in our world today. And it's also something I think that our learners are keenly aware of. And somehow there's a gap between what our learners are keenly aware of on this front and where the faculty's thinking might be. And the other piece about this paper that I would just want to put a little flag for our readers is that this paper should get every medical school and every academic teaching hospital real cause for pause. You can, as this paper shows you, and you probably will, be evaluated on your institution's advocacy and their work about planetary health. So leaders, quite frankly, this should be something you worry about. What is the score your institution's going to get on your planetary health? What kind of responsibility do you have, and are you paying attention to that? Because I'm of the opinion that our learners do care, and our learners are smart. And if an institution is pulling its weight on these kinds of agendas, I think learners will vote with their feet. They'll demonstrate how they feel, how important this is to them by going to institutions that actually rank well. So, I just love this paper. Jason.
The coolest thing is that the instrument that's being used and published multiple times was developed by med students. That's the coolest thing of that whole paper.
Right? and they're going to be like, they care, they're going to use it. It's a good point. So Linda, thank you for choosing it. Which then brings me to my first paper. And I don't think it's an accident that John and I both went to the Writer's Craft series in Perspectives on Medical Education. Tip of the hat to the editors-in-chief over there, Eric Dries and Lauren Maggio. Thank you so much for championing this kind of work in our field. You know, writing is really hard work, and it takes some expertise, and the pieces that are in there, predominantly written by Lorelei Lingard, but also by Chris Watling, and I've had the pleasure of writing 2 of them. But these manuscripts really are intended to help you go from being a good writer to being a great writer. And, you know, when it comes to a topic like this, I care. And then when that sort of magic sauce happens, because I just think the world of Lorelei Lingard and her writing and her work, and I'm lucky enough to count her as somebody who supervised me during my thesis and a friend. But when she writes, it's always worth reading, always, period. So this manuscript that I picked, and actually, you know, John, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things at the same time here. Can you see if this is like, did we pick, were there only 2 writer's crafts out in 2024? I feel that that's true. And if it is, I think, you know, how interesting that we picked both of them for this series. Anyway, manuscript is called Meta Commentary, Identifying and Mastering Dear Reader Moments by Lorelei Lingard. And this paper invites all of us as authors, MedEd, to remember that when we write, we're not just presenting our readers with a description of the study we did or of the opinion we have, the insights we generated. Good writers also think about how the reader is reacting to the things that you're writing about. And a great author, a great writer, is one who anticipates when a reader is going to get worried, is going to make an interpretation of what you wrote that you really didn't want them to take away. That was not your message. And that great writer, they cut off those interpretations. They stop the reader from going down the wrong road. They cut them off at the pass. And that's a moment in these papers, Lorelei calls them dear reader moments, where you, as an author, make sure your reader's going in the direction you want and don't go off on some tangent. So, for example, if you're writing about a critical literature review, this might be a moment as a thoughtful reader, author, where you say, dear reader, now don't get confused. A critical review doesn't mean critical theory. It's a whole other thing. So you provide a just-in-time definition, maybe between some interesting M dashes, to make sure that your reader's following you. This paper walks you through how to think about those moments, how to identify them in your writing, and also, maybe even more importantly, how to address them. This really is a handy manuscript that I highly recommend to all of our listeners. So I'm interested, Jason, what did you think of this paper?
First of all, John, do you want to answer that question from a few seconds ago? Is there only 2 writer's craft?
I'm going to say I can only find 2, but I don't feel confident in my search. So I'm going to do scare quotes, or that's only 2.
Listen,
Create a monster.
This paper is gold. Like, first of all, everything that Lorelei Lingard writes is just such a beautiful paper to read. The writing's so good. But this paper is gold. It opened my eyes to a whole bunch of things that I didn't have words for in the past. You know, she always emphasizes that every paper is a dialogue with the reader, having empathy with who your reader is. But once, it's like the Matrix, once she points out all these dear reader moments, all those little worry moments in your paper where you're worried about somebody going down sideways or misunderstanding or having a concern, now you see it everywhere in all your writing. You see it in the paper that you read. You see it in the news. You know, you can see all of these dear reader moments, and wow, it's really powerful. And I'm going to use this paper in the future. All right, so I guess I'm up next. And I'm very sorry for the audience, but I picked one of John's papers. But I couldn't let this one go. This is such an important paper for everybody who's a clinician. I just had to bring it up. So let me just open it up here. All right. So this
I
is from
sip nervously from my skull mug, on which I sip from the skull of my enemies, Jason. Speak carefully.
I thought you were going to have an Alas Poor Yorick moment. Anybody? Name the play? Alas Poor Yorick? Thank you. Just saying, people.
Okay, it looks more like a Day of the Dead mug. Mexico.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, it does. Yeah. All right. On that note, speaking of dead things, let's talk about one of John's papers. Actually, this is a really important. John just spit out his coffee. That's awesome. Okay, so this is dual process models of clinical reasoning, the central role of knowledge and diagnostic expertise. Sounds like a dry paper. This is Clash of the Titans stuff. This is so good. The first author is Jeff Norman. John is the senior author on this, and this is from the Journal of Evaluation and Clinical Practice. So some of you, let me just put this in context, some of you may have heard of the Hubble tension. The Hubble tension, anyone? John's smiling. The Hubble tension is all the world's astrophysicists losing their minds. They're in two camps. They're fighting. It's a clash of the titans of astrophysicists because there's two ways to calculate, certain parameters of the universe, and they don't agree. So there's two like warring factions. This is just like this paper. This is the med-ed version of the Hubble tension. I just decided today to dub it the diagnostic dissension, which I think is going to go viral.
I'm totally stealing that. That's amazing.
The diagnostic dissension. There you go. Okay, so what's this about? This is about diagnostic errors, which everybody's excited about. We want to improve patient care. There's lots of papers that say that there are diagnostic errors that lead to harm in patients. Everybody for decades has been trying to clarify where these diagnostic errors come from and then maybe promote interventions. Along comes a Nobel Prize winning psychologist who says there's a dual processing theory of how our brains work. There's a system 1 that's super fast, and there's a system 2 that's analytical and a little bit slower. This was applied to clinical reasoning over the last few years, and lots of papers have come out on this. And the assumption, the thread, the meta through all of these papers in medicine is that system 1 is so fast, it must be error-ridden. And that's where all these diagnostic errors come from. What we should be doing maybe is promoting system 2 and very slow analytical thinking across all our clinicians. And that'll save people. Unfortunately, it is exactly wrong. It is entirely the opposite. So this paper walks through some of the evidence for that, helps us understand the current state of the art of this dialogue. It turns out that faster is more accurate, that system 2 often adds little, if any, improvement, and sometimes an expert's actually slowing them down makes it worse. Teaching things like cognitive bias, which slow you down, actually causes harm to making the right diagnosis. This paper is just filled with chewy goodness about clinical reasoning. In fact, the paper ends with, hey, maybe the dual processing theory is actually wrong. Maybe it's a misunderstanding of what actually happens in our brains. And if you reformulate it, maybe it's better. And I just got to give credit to John. I bug John all the time because he's so smart and he just needs to be taken down a peg or two. But in this paper, it's filled with John's research. So John, this is kind of like your last lecture paper. This is filled with all the stuff you've done for a number of years. Kudos to you. Any pearls from your perspective?
Well, thanks for choosing it. I will say we should cancel all the other papers and just talk endlessly about my program of research. This is a decade and a half of multiple studies, multiple publications, and we have a corollary paper published in a different journal for a different clinical audience that says, so what? How do you actually apply this to your teaching? I would say this is not the work of me, but it's the work of a collective team. And so there's a whole bunch of people that are part of this. We think it's really important because patient outcomes are at stake. And the rhetoric is tell clinicians to go slower and teach them about biases and help them unpack their system. And we think that is a fool's errand and will distract us from really important things. So this is not just a theoretical paper. We think that there's real world consequences of this. And the metaphor I've been shopping around more recently is it's not a hardware problem. So Kahneman and Crosscarry and others, depending where you read, would say, hey, you should think slower, you should get your hardware updated. Somehow your working memory is the fault of it all. And we're trying to make the argument it's a software problem. You need to update your iOS, meaning that when you make mistakes, typically it's a function that you did not possess knowledge. And there's a quote, I'm trying to remember who said it. I don't want to misattribute. So basically the quote goes, if you've never heard of myasthenia gravis, you'll never reason to that diagnosis from first principles. And so what we would articulate is we should really focus on the type of knowledge and experience that we're giving to our clinicians and supporting our experts in accessing in a long-term memory. And that's the way that we are going to start to improve the outcomes for our patients. So thanks, Jason, for giving a little bit of light, not to my work, but to a topic that I think has real world consequences.
It's so important. Everybody's got to read this.
I'm still on this Hubble thing.
Google it.
Like, right? But I'm just saying, this is like a major issue for somebody. How big is the universe? I feel like I got more pressing matters, but anyway.
What?
I got to say, though, I was really surprised, Jason, that you talked about this being John's final lecture.
It was like a last lecture. It was like a swan song kind of paper.
Yeah, I think
I had the same reaction, Linda.
he's got a couple more years to go, I think.
1 or 2.
Is it something I don't know? As the results of my MRI?
Yeah, it was mailed to me by accident, John. Sorry, I'll
Just a
send it.
little aside. This is the end of 2024. Guess what I bought myself for a holiday gift?
Huh.
Do you want to know? Sure did. There's a game winning in New York. Yeah. I also bought that too. Getting a whole body MRI. That's for a different episode. Let's move on. The next paper I think was a great one. In fact, we debated it amongst the hosts here about doing a full episode. I lost that debate. Dear listeners, write in after you hear about this paper so that I can overrule Lava and Linda and Jason and put it back on the docket. The paper's by Stallmeyer, Brown, and O'Brien, friends of the show, and it's published in Medical Education. Oh, hang on. It's not published in Medical. It's published in the sister journal, The Clinical Teacher in 2024.
That's actually the most shocking part of this paper.
Yeah, I agree.
The title is How to Discuss Transferability of Qualitative Research in Health Professions Education. And I think this gets at a debate that we're always having here on the show, which is everybody from the clinical world every day thinks about generalizability. In a quantitative approach, an objectivist approach, how can we come to a conclusion that's common across all conditions? And the challenge, of course, is we come to conclusions that are very thin, very superficial, because in order to make that leap, you have to be very tight and very explicit in what you think is going to be generalizable. The transferability question is not just a synonym. It's more a process of looking in from our subjectivist lens. Can we ensure that the niche or the context in which we're writing has relevance outside of that particular domain of research? When I publish this, will there be others that are impacted by my work? And so Renee Stallmeyer and her co-authors talk about transfer, and they talk about 3 really important ideas. One, it's not something that comes at the end of your study in the second last paragraph of who cares, why does it matter? It comes right at the beginning. And it's the idea of what is the applicability here? Can we think about our context? Can we understand our context? So when we frame our results, we say, in this context, this is how it works. And so if you have a context of similar nature, there may be transfer to you. The second idea is around resonance. It's the ability to evoke a familiarity or a shared experience so that when the reader or a researcher in a similar domain reads that, and says, I see elements that evoke or ring true for the questions and in the context and environment in which I'm writing. And then the last is this idea of theoretical engagement. And it's more of an abstract element of transfer. How can I link my findings to existing theory? Or how can I build new theory that will then ground, provide a lens, or link other work that's emerging? And so I think if we think of transfer not as, all right, we're going to just talk a little bit about here's how it happens, but we think about it in a much more systematic way, we get a richer, deeper understanding of a problem that then impacts beyond the very limited context of where that research is conducted. And it starts to move this conversation about objectivists, subjectivists, closer to the middle of parallel ways of changing the outputs, parallel ways of changing the conversations we're having in health professions education. Okay, off my soapbox. I really want to hear what you think about this, Linda.
Well, I got to say, when I read the title, I thought, ugh, this is going to be very technical, and couldn't figure out actually why it was in the clinical teacher. But then I started to read it, and I think there's a couple of things. I think it's important to be able to explain to the positive people perusing papers and reviews who push for generalizability. Did you notice the alliteration there, Lara?
I did, yeah.
And it is really readable, as I expected from all 3 of these authors, and it is really practical. You can give this paper to any learner, somebody starting off in qualitative research and doing a study, and they can just follow the steps. I'd also like to point out more generally that of the 5 papers we've reviewed so far, 3 of them have emphasized that dyadic two-way relationship between reader and writer or researcher and audience. It have emphasized that conversation. That's becoming obviously a big thing in 2024. Lara, you were waving your hand madly.
Well, one of the things that I just wanted to comment on that, Jason said that it was surprising this was in the clinical teacher. And one of the things I just want to highlight for our listeners is that the clinical teacher, very generously and like with a lot of foresight, created a series called the Triptych series. So triptychs are, paintings of 3 that could stand alone independently, but when you put the 3 of them together, they mean more. And in the Triptych series, it's a qualitative series about different elements of qualitative research, and there's a how-to paper, and that's what this paper is, a how-to paper. But that paper is then accompanied by an evidence paper that illustrates how it can be related and applied in research. And then the third piece is a possibilities paper that articulates how it could have been different had the researchers made different choices at that front end in the how-to topic, right? It's a gorgeous set of papers that TCT put together. So tip of the hat over there.
Yeah, very good. That's let me carry on with another paper now. Let's think about artificial intelligence. We probably didn't think about it 2 years ago, but John is cheering. So the use of AI and what I'll call its subdivisions or subparts, such as large language models, such as ChatGPT, et cetera, have shot up tremendously in the last couple of years. And it's affected medical education as it's affected everything else in the world. And we've reviewed a few specific uses of AI on past papers podcasts. Oh boy, I'm really alliterating today, aren't I? And this paper is a timely and a welcome review of this, what I'll call emerging concept. I guess I chose 2 particular emerging concepts for this 2024 review. The aim of the paper was to review and analyze the literature on large language models, focusing on its impact in medical education. The authors are Lucas, Upperman, and Robinson. It's in Medical Education in Review, which is a great series, by the way. And the title of the paper is A Systematic Review of Large Language Models and Their Implications in Medical Education. Their results, well, what's good about the results is it talks about the applications not only for learners, but for teachers and for education scholars, and goes into some detail on that. Talks about what's bad or challenging about large language models. The hallucinations, the fact that it might let people rely on technology and not their own thinking, the issue of academic integrity, which has been raised a lot in the last year or so, and ethical concerns such as privacy and bias. And what they come up with at the end is that large language models have a huge potential, but it's got to be tempered with some concern. So this is a sort of first out of the gate paper. That's one of the reasons I recommend it, but it's also one that very nicely packages what we know now about LLMs, which is why I'll recommend it now. Does that mean I'll recommend it 6 months from now, the way AI is going? I don't know. Maybe not. Lara, what do you think?
Linda, I was so happy you picked this paper because I'm really optimistic about LLMs, and I think they have a lot to contribute to medical education. They hold a lot of promise, and there is going to be impact, yes. We have to recognize that we need to evolve. We have a new tool in LLMs, and the question we have to think about is how are we going to wield it? Yeah, I'm okay with it changing the way we work and the nature of our jobs. It's called progress. I have no problem with that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to think about this paper because it helps us to think about letting go of old ideas. And actually, that's a theme that I'm going to pick up on with my second choice. Can I just get 2 points there for a segue? Just 2 points. That was a nice segue.
0.5.
2 sheepadoodles and a
Kroner something.
I'm going to say that I did that. We circulated a 1-sentence summary of our papers to everyone. So, of course, I got ChatGPT to make the summary. Right, yours.
Well played. Yeah.
De rigueur.
Okay, so the paper I picked for two specific reasons. My second selection. The paper is entitled "Graduate Reflections on Professionalism and Identity: Interactions of Race, Gender, and Activism." It was authored by, and please, I'm going to try to say some of these names correctly. I'm a little concerned. Mocha Chain, Wyatt, Cooper, Green, Thompson, and George. The first thing I want to do is highlight that this paper highlights a fundamental premise, and the paper fundamentally challenges us to reconsider professionalism in medicine and in health professions education. The authors argue, and I can't get behind them strongly enough, like if there was a way to underline, put in bold right now, I'd be doing it.
Double click, red line, all the words you love from me.
Yeah, but the double click, anyway, we'll come back to that. Professionalism is ill-defined, and while that's a problem, the real problem they want to point out is that professionalism can be, and I'm going to quote here, weaponized to police and push those who do not fit the norm of what medical professionals should look like or behave, close quote. Boom. It is such an important consideration. It's like individuals have this idea of what a good doctor looks like, acts like, how they dress, how they speak, what kind of actions they take. And if you don't fit that expectations, then you're not professional. But who gets to decide what is the right way to dress or speak or act or advocate? Any of that. There's no one size fits all when it comes to professionalism. And these authors take on that idea, face on, they call it, they name it, and then they challenge all of us to do better. I love that. But that's only one reason why I picked this paper, because the other reason just made me just tickled with joy. Did you all read the methods and the results section and see the words I, my, me? Oh, love that. So the second reason I picked this paper is because it's written by a team, but they use personal pronouns. So me, I, to center the voice of the first author who selected participants, who interviewed them, and who led the analysis. It offers real clarity about who is the primary author of the analysis and the interpretations therein. I love this. This is intentional shaking off of assumptions. It shakes off assumptions about objectivity as a primary marker of quality in our research. It honestly and candidly describes what the first author did, and it's unapologetic about it, as it should be. I love this candor, and I love this journal. So this is in Teaching and Learning for Medicine, by the way, for not shying away from publishing a paper that said, I did this. And I just got to give you this quote from the methods section. This is my analysis with the support of my authorial team. Boom. Win. Love this paper.
It's gorge.
It is.
I'm going to jump in here and say that this is an incredibly powerful paper. And I agree, there's probably two big things that really stuck with me when I read this paper. The first was the enlightenment it brings to the conversation around professionalism. So the professionalism discourse is always a dull roar. This is a clear voice rising above. I think around the world there is still a professionalism thread that says professionalism is about this good behavior and the most powerful people get to define what that is. There are other people in the world who are questioning that and trying to figure out what the way forward is for institutions, trying to, to make something new that works for everybody. I think that this puts such a spotlight on the idea of activism being called out as unprofessional. And so if you're struggling with what that looks like, this is a really, really important paper. And then, as you said, the methodology was eye-opening. The use of the first-person pronoun throughout the paper was really interesting, and it strikes the reader in a positive way. I just thought this was so powerful. The stories give you insights, so everybody should read this paper. Hey, so I'm going to take the mic, and I'm going to introduce the last paper in this series, the Wrapping Papers episode. Now, some of you may or may not love this paper because it's not necessarily accessible. It's a deep read. But I'm going to pitch to everybody that's listening to this podcast, how many of you have ever been in a room where you're explaining something med ed and someone in the room said, where is the positivist RCT on this or the meta-analysis? What's the effect size? And so really this is a perpetual debate in our field about what is evidence. So that's this paper. This is an all-star cast. It does include John, but otherwise it's an all-star cast. I'm kidding, John. Just amazing people. The first author is Rachel Alloway. You get Bridget O'Brien, John, Laren Maggio, Tony Artino, Lauren Niman, Yoon-Soo Park, Meredith Young, Aliki Thomas. I don't normally go through all the authors, but this is like the We Are the World soundtrack. The title of the paper is there a problem with evidence in health professions educations and academic medicine? This is a must read. So here's my pitch to you. This paper is really about what constitutes evidence, these ongoing discourse and debates. And it's so apropos to what's happening on a daily basis. Has HPE scholarship had an impact? And then the framework for this paper is Agiris I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing Chris Agiris' name properly. He's a management guru, and he proposes sort of like triple loop way of looking at organizations. It's applied to this paper and our field and its evidence. So the first loop is, are there problems with health professions education knowledge or our research base or our evidence base? The second loop is, can we do that better? It's kind of like a fidelity question. And the third loop is, are we asking the right questions? The paper walks through with a lens of producers of med ed research or health professions education research and consumers of research, and then leaves you with some recommendations. This is kind of my take on it. They're sort of flagging for producers, those of us who do studies. We need to pay more attention to context. We need to pay attention to the metrics and whether or not they're really good markers of use of our work. We need to pay attention to relevance to consumers, and we need to make sure that our papers are accessible so that they can have a difference in our field. For consumers, there was a kind of a thread about, reminder that health professions education is not suitable to methods checklists, that we need to have epistemic humility, that utility is in the eye of the beholder. We need to be more informed, those of us who are consumers, of the methods, so we're really using the right papers to inform the right decisions. So we need to be more careful. I just thought this is an important topic, an important paper. It's worth taking the time to work your way through it. All right. What do you think, John?
Yeah, John, before you respond, could I ask you, as you're talking, to tell us how it was to work with all these amazing brains? I think it would be, this is a group that will be so much fun to.
It's like, what was it like being in the Beatles?
Well, it's obvious I walked into the Zoom call by accident and someone sent me a login and like, oh, and then it was slowly awkward. And if I was going to use that We Are the World metaphor, I was definitely Huey Lewis in the crowd. Is you there? Rachel is probably Lionel Richie. If you weren't around in the 80s, you're not going to get that reference. If you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, go look it up. The process, Linda, was we had a bunch of calls just for the purposes of debating Jason's premise. We all found every now and then what's the evidence for this? What's that? And it started off without an intention to write anything. And this paper was one of the outputs. And subsequently, we're looking now at sponsoring, I'm not sure what, I don't want to misspeak and mislabel it, but basically it's going to be some kind of in-person event where there's a sharing of ideas. Call it a consensus conference, call it a debate, call it an opportunity for people to come and wrestle with an important idea. And it was many, many hours of calls before we even said, hey, we should write a paper and try to get it down. And then when you said, everybody write an outline, we immediately had 10 different outlines. So thank you to Rachel, who as the first author did a big heavy lift, tried to hear everybody and synthesize something. And if you ever want to imagine what version control looks like, this is a Herculean challenge of keeping version control, because people would edit, people would undo the edit and offer the edit a different way. And I think we might have ended up with a Google spreadsheet that looked like someone had vomited a rainbow onto it. Anyway, all that to say is, I think this is an important addition to this debate. I come from McMaster. I'm contractually obligated to say evidence-based medicine at every public presentation I ever give. And it's always at that first loop level of, did we do the thing right? Did we get the confidence interval right? Is there some little flaw in the analysis? Can we tweak the math? And I'm using math and confidence interval very purposefully here. And if you are in health professions education, you already know that that tool, an important one, is so limited in asking these complex, wicked problems we confront every day. And so it's often we can jump up to that second level of, are we doing the right thing? So is our positionality, is the way that we're approaching this question and trying to find an answer? And evidence really is part of the discussion we have in the paper. What we're trying to say is that use of knowledge to inform a debate or find an answer or to provide a bulwark. And that's often where we end. And I think what this paper challenges us all to do, including myself, which is to move up to that third loop of, so what is bold, scary quotes right? Is this even framing of evidence, or is even this supposition that there is a preferred outcome? Is that even the conversation we should be having? And why are we as scholars pursuing this line of inquiry? Is it simply in the service of a practical element or not? And what do we do with the scholarship output? And so there's many layers you can tackle this problem. This paper outlines one approach with some very strict limitations about how far the conversation can go, because there's a practical word limit. All that to say is I was deeply grateful to be a part of that conversation, because I will tell you that my own thinking was pushed in a lot of ways. But dear McMaster, I still believe in EBM. Thus saith, I swear, pinky swear, whatever I need. All right, everybody, we've reached the end of wrapping paper. We've wrapped 2024. I wasn't sure, Jason, how this is going to work. I thought when you said wrapping papers, we were going to like roll cigarettes and offer a tutorial on what we're going to do. I thought maybe we'd do a Spotify wrap to say, here's all the things I listen to if you're a Spotify person. Apparently, I'm in the 90th percentile of the listeners in the globe. So Noah Kahn recorded a very special message just for me because I'm that important, and nobody else received it. But there you have it.
John, wake up, John.
So I do have a...
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say 2024 was a good year. Like publishing wise, there were a lot of really good things out there. So it was an exciting year to have conversations with y'all.
So I'm going to sign off with a little poem. Season's greetings from our podcast crew, Jason, Linda, Lara, and John too, with stories of teaching and lessons profound in medical education, wisdom abounds. Happy holidays to all. May your learning renew. With that, dear listeners, thanks for being with us this past year. We look forward to seeing you, talking with you in 2025.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye et à la prochaine 2025.
Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to the Papers Podcast. We hope we made you just slightly smarter. The podcast is a production of the Unit for Teaching and Learning at the Karolinska Institutet. The executive producer today was my friend Teresa Sörö. The technical producer today was Samuel Lundberg. You can learn more about the Papers Podcast and contact us at www.thepaperspodcast.com. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for all you do. Take care.